Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the study today. I pray that you are having a good week and that you are drawing closer to the Lord each and every day. I pray that these studies are an encouragement to you. And again, the goal behind this is to help you draw near to God and to see what beautiful things there are in His Word, and that it can fulfill what is called the Vahavta, which is Deuteronomy, starting with verse or chapter 6, verse 4, but continuing in verse 5, with "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength." So that is the purpose of these lessons, and I pray that it is being fulfilled in your life. So with that, we're going to go ahead and share our screen. Um, we are in the book of First Samuel and chapter 15, and going verse by verse. And again, sometimes we wish we could go a little faster, just because that's our nature. But when I look at these verses, last week was just such a powerful verse into um, the nature of God and understanding where his heart is at. And so we have quite a contrast today, because we're going to see where Saul's heart is at today. And it is not in the right place. So here we go with verse 30, as you can see on our screen. Remember, this is Hebrew. It's reading from right to left. And verse 30 starts out as Vayomer Chatati Ata Bodeni na neged zichne ami veneged. And so I'm starting to read a little bit of that for you as I become more comfortable with it and progress in my ability to read Hebrew. I want to share that with you so that you can hopefully um, try to sound the words out yourself. I am using more of a modern Hebrew pronunciation, so it will not match exactly with the phonetics of the what's used in Bible Hub, which is using more of a classical or biblical Hebrew pronunciation. So the Vayomer, you will see that all throughout the scriptures, especially if you start reading in the book of Exodus, you'll see Vayomer Moshe, Vayomer Elohim la Moshe, that God spoke to Moses. Very, very common statement. What we see here, though, that I want to point out is that underneath these words are the grammatical explanation. And when we get to chatati, which is the word translated as "I have sinned," you'll notice that it's a verb, and it's listed in the form of intensity, which is there are 7 different verb, we'll call them conjugations, for just so, for those of you who studied other languages, that somewhat makes sense to me. You have the kal, you have the nifal, you have the pial, pual, hopfal, hifal, and hifpael, which are one of the 7. And the kal is the one without any emotion behind it. It would be somewhat known as the textbook form of the word. Doesn't have any futuristic or past indication, no tense to it. Hebrew only has 2, we'll call them moods. Some people will call them tenses, and that is the perfect and the imperfect, which means that the perfect means it's a completed action, and the imperfect means it is uncompleted, which can sometimes be known as the futuristic tense, where the perfect can sometimes be referred to as the past tense. And some Hebrew teachers will use those words, but the majority of them will not use the words past, present, or future tense. They will stay with the classic Hebrew understanding of perfect and imperfect. So with that, what you see here is this is a verb. It's a kal perfect. And the perfect makes sense because Saul is saying, "I have sinned." In English, we would relate to that as a past action that the action is over. He's referring to something that happened previously. It's a completed action. It's perfect. But what I am surprised here is you would think that after being confronted by Samuel and realizing that God was angry with him, not happy with him, that his um, confession would be maybe more of a repentant um, form, and he would be feeling some emotion. He would be feeling remorse, that this would be, as we understand repentance, would come with tears and um, strong crying and emotion and feeling behind it. Um, but that is not the indication we have given here. If that is, we would see this in a more intensive form of like perhaps a PL. That's what I would have expected to see, or maybe somewhat of a um, type of reflexive, that's showing a reflection of what's going on inside of him, or maybe even a nephal, that he's being caused by his heart to say these words. But we see it as a cal, which is just a plain, I've sinned, let's move on. He's not feeling, we don't get the impression he's feeling any remorse or anything on it. But when we go to the next part of this verse, Veata kebadeni, we see that this word kebadeni, which of course has the kaf in front of it, which is a somewhat of a preposition, which means as or like. If we break it into that way, the translators didn't look at that. Um, but the word kabod is the word for glory. It is the word, it has a word of meaning weight, of something weighty, something that's weighing upon you. So look where Saul's thoughts were at. We know that he realized he had sinned, but his emotion wasn't in the idea of dealing with the sin. What he was concerned about was what others thought of him. And that's reflected in the fact that this word, kebadeni, is in a PL form. And it's in an imperfect, which means he wants this to occur um, and yet to come in the future. He's trying to acquire this. But the fact that it's in a PL form shows you where Saul's heart is at, that his heart isn't looking to please God or to be in a right relationship with God. It's in the respect of the people. It's wanting to be honored by the people. It's wanting his ego stroked. It's wanting his, personality to be built up. And this is just a very, very sad commentary here that you can kind of pick that up in English. You just don't pick it up in the intensity as you in English as you do in the Hebrew. What's also kind of interesting here is he uses the word na, which is the word for please. You don't find that used a lot in the scriptures. That Hebrew language is not a very poetic, excuse me, take that back. It's not a very flowery language. You don't see a lot of the flowery expressions in Hebrew like you do in English or maybe French. Because it's not a romantic language by any means. So to see the word please used in a sentence always causes me notice. You find it only in a few places, and the fact that Saul would use it here, obviously he's concerned about this situation, and he's pleading with Samuel to help him. You know, here's strong emotion. Honor me, please. I certainly would have liked to have seen that used with the admission of sin, and I think that would have served him much, much better um, to get his heart right with God again. But that's, as you're going to see here, that's not where Saul was at. His heart was not inclined towards God. His heart was in a different place. And the Hebrew reflects that so very strongly. So please, neged Nani, Zakne, Ami, before the elders. This word neged is somewhat interesting. We did a study on it when I was doing the um, study of Genesis, where Adam was created and then Eve was created. This word neged is used in description of Eve's role, um, translated in Genesis as being a helpmeet. But here we see the same word um, has some different meanings to it. It is someone meant to be opposite to, and that's a fascinating study when you look at Genesis. That it's here you can see it on the right side of the screen where it was first used in Genesis 2:18. That Eve was not created to be a help meet. She was created to be someone who would assist Adam in drawing closer to God. And as what we deduce from the scriptures here, someone to provide a different viewpoint, someone to challenge him and to help make him better. And sometimes what's required is that you don't want someone who's always going along with everything you say and just being a head nodder in a yes affirmative. You don't want a yes person. You want someone who's going to make you think and make you challenged. And I find it's interesting that that same word is being used here. Um, before the people, as what was used for Eve's role in relating to Adam. So, interesting study for another time, but it helps shed a little bit of light on the relationship of Adam and Eve and what God's intention was for a husband and wife, for them to make each other better. And that's not always by just agreeing with each other. And so he's saying, he wants something to happen before these elders. He's been disgraced in their eyes. He's challenged. He wants things to be made better. And here we see the word used again, then again, and before the people of Israel. And then he said he wants to return with Samuel and worship Yahweh. And the last part of this verse here is just very saddening, because look at it uses the word Elohecha, which is your God. Um, I would have preferred that he used the word Eloheni, which would be my God, but he uses the word Elohecha, which is your God. So you can tell from this that he knows his relationship is severed with God. He's not even calling God his God anymore. He is using the name of God, Yahweh, Elohecha, um, meaning the merciful one, but also uh, the Elohim form, knowing that judgment is there, knowing that there's a, uh, a, a judgment that will be coming upon him, and he's appealing to the mercies. And then he uses another word that will be the last one we look at today, and it's a long one. It's 78:12, Vehish tahaviti, Tehish tahaveti, that I may worship. There's a lot of things packed in here. You have the vav um, con, conjunction in there, which means and or that, and then you have the hey with the hirig underneath, which is where you get the hish, which is an indicator that it is a verb in a hitfeel form. Many of the hitfeel or hitpael, excuse me, forms have that little clue that when you have the hey and the here, you have a sound that sounds like hitpael. And so that's the more of a reflexive form that he wants it to occur. But again, I would have wanted to see this in a PL form. I would have wanted to see this in an intensive, that I may go and worship, that I may pour my heart out to God. Um, And again, we just don't see that here. I'm going to take a look at this word for worship, which is um, shin, chet, hey, shaka. And it's very interesting because we in Christianity, or at least in our modern society, struggle with what worship means. And so when we look at this Hebrew word for shakha, we see that it means to bow down, that worship in the Bible always involved a position. It involved doing something. For us, we have what are called worship services. I don't know that that is really a biblically applied term, because we have praise and worship, we have preaching, we have time of prayer, and yes, and many times people are in a bowed position. But in the scriptures, when we come across the term for worship, it always involved a humbling, involved a, and that form of humbling was practiced by your position of bowing down, a place of submission, of bowing your knees, and bowing low. Look at all the words that were translated here from this word shachach, is to bow down, bowing low, doing homage, prostrating yourself, something that's weighing you down, forcing you down to the ground. Um, Gives us a much better understanding of what it means to worship. And I guess with that thought, I'm going to leave you with I don't know, maybe I won't call it a challenge, but just uh, make an observation when you are at your church service today. Does it include worship? Do you see worship being practiced according to the biblical understanding of bowing down? Yes, you can bow in your heart. Many people will say, I'm bowing in my heart, I'm bowing my head. But does it fit the practice here of what we see the biblical model being given as to bow our knees and to, you see a lot of people will stand and pray, but is that worship? Is what's happening truly worship, and does it fit the biblical model? And so again, we see these beautiful things from the scriptures that guide us. And if you I believe if you practice this and according to the biblical model, you will feel God's presence, you will see change occur in your life, you will be drawn nearer into his presence, because this is where he guides us, this is what he directs us to do. And unfortunately, we're going to find that this was not an all corrective measure in Saul's life, and it didn't get him back on the straight and narrow pathway again. But we do see that he knew what to do. Unfortunately, he just didn't practice it. So again, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this class today. Pray God's blessing will be upon you, and look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.